Captain James Walker felt the emergency alarm screaming through his cargo ship as the alien vessels surrounded them. The Iron Phoenix had been carrying important supplies to the outer colonies when the Krellian raiders found them. These aliens were known across human space for their cruelty and their strange biomechanical ships that looked more like living creatures than machines. James ran through the corridors of his ship as explosions rocked the hull. His crew was already at the escape pods, following emergency procedures they had drilled hundreds of times. The Krellians were boarding through the cargo bay, their scaled bodies moving with deadly grace as they cut down anyone who resisted. "Captain, we need to go now," shouted Lieutenant Davis from the nearest escape pod. "The ship is lost." But James had one more thing to do. He reached the engineering section and placed his hand on the quantum core control panel. The Iron Phoenix was carrying experimental quantum cores, devices that could tear holes in space itself if they became unstable. The military had been testing them as a new form of faster-than-light travel, but James knew they could be dangerous in the wrong conditions. The Krellian raiders were already in the main corridor, their plasma weapons burning through anything in their path. These creatures stood 7 feet tall with gray scales covering their bodies and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. Their ships were grown rather than built, using strange alien biology that humans barely understood. James typed in his authorization code and began the quantum core destabilization sequence. The computer warned him that this would make the cores extremely dangerous, but he ignored the warnings. If he was going to lose his ship, he would make sure the aliens paid a price for taking it. "Core destabilization in 30 seconds, the computer announced in its calm voice. James ran for the escape pods as fast as he could. Behind him, he could hear the Krellians getting closer. Their strange language sounded like hissing and clicking, but he had heard it enough times to know they were excited about their easy victory. He dove into the last remaining escape pod just as Lieutenant Davis sealed the hatch. The small craft launched away from the Iron Phoenix with a sharp acceleration that pressed them into their seats. Through the small window, James watched as the Krellian ships moved around his cargo vessel like predators surrounding wounded prey. "Sir, what did you do back there?" asked Davis, checking the pod's basic controls. "I gave them a present they won't expect," James replied grimly. The Krellians were already setting fire to the Iron Phoenix. This was their usual method. They would burn human ships to destroy evidence and send a message to other humans about what happened to those who resisted them. The alien raiders moved with casual confidence, clearly believing that humans were weak and easily defeated. James activated the emergency communication system and sent out a distress signal. His message included coordinates and a warning about the Krellian attack. Most importantly, he sent a personal message to the passenger liner New Hope, where his wife Helen and son Robert were traveling to meet him at the colony. "Helen, if you get this message, stay away from the shipping lanes," he transmitted. "The Krellians are hunting human ships in this sector. Take Robert and get to the nearest military base. I love you both." The transmission cut off as the escape pod's power systems began failing. They were designed for short-range rescue operations, not long-distance travel. James and Davis could only drift and hope that someone would pick up their emergency beacon. Behind them, the Iron Phoenix burned brightly against the darkness of space. The Krellians had completely surrounded the ship and were systematically destroying it section by section. Their biomechanical vessels pulsed with strange organic lights as they fed on the energy released by the burning human technology. What the aliens did not know was that the quantum cores were still active inside the burning wreckage. The destabilization sequence James had started was continuing even as the ship burned. The cores were designed to be stable under normal conditions, but the intense heat and radiation from the fire was causing them to resonate in ways their creators had never intended. Deep inside the burning ship, quantum energy began building up in patterns that defied normal physics. The cores were creating a cascade effect that would soon spread through subspace itself. The Krellians had no way to detect this invisible buildup of destructive energy. Commander Thexlan of the Krellian fleet watched the burning human ship with satisfaction. These pathetic creatures always surrendered so easily. Their ships had no real defenses, their weapons were primitive compared to Krellian biotechnology, and their crews fled at the first sign of danger. Another successful hunt, Thexlan communicated to his fleet through their biological neural link. "Mark the locations of any other human vessels in this sector. We will eliminate them before they can spread word of our presence." The Krellian commander had no idea that the burning wreckage below was about to become the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. The quantum cascade building inside the Iron Phoenix would soon reach critical levels, sending waves of destruction through subspace at speeds faster than light itself. James watched his ship burn as the escape pod drifted away. He had lost everything he had worked for, but he hoped that his sacrifice would mean something. The quantum cores might give humanity a weapon against these alien raiders, if anyone could figure out what was happening before it was too late. The Krellians finished their work and began moving away from the burning wreckage, already planning their next attack on human civilian ships. They had no idea that Captain James Walker had just lit a fuse that would burn all the way to their homeworld. Commander Thexlan stretched his 4 arms and felt the satisfaction of another successful raid flowing through his scaled body. The human cargo ship had burned beautifully, just like all the others. These weak creatures never put up any real fight against the mighty Krellian fleet. Their ships were made of simple metal and circuits, nothing like the living vessels that the Krellians grew in their biofactories. The Krellian commander walked through the organic corridors of his flagship. The walls pulsed with a slow heartbeat, and bioluminescent strips provided a soft blue glow. His ship was alive, grown from special cells that could survive in the vacuum of space. Every Krellian vessel was part machine and part creature, responding to their thoughts and emotions through neural links implanted in their spines. All units, prepare for regenerative sleep cycle, Thexlan broadcast to his fleet through the biological communication network. We have earned our rest after this easy victory. The Krellian crews across the 7 ships began their preparations for deep hibernation. This was how their species recovered from combat stress and healed from any injuries they might have received. During sleep, their bodies would repair themselves and their bioships would perform maintenance on their living systems. Thexlan had already planned their next targets. The passenger liner New Hope was carrying 300 humans through this sector, along with several smaller cargo vessels. All of them would need to be eliminated to prevent word of Krellian activities from reaching Earth or the other human colonies. The Krellians had been raiding human shipping lanes for months, always careful to leave no survivors who could report their presence. They had learned that humans were surprisingly good at sharing information when they worked together, so complete elimination was the only safe approach. As his crew entered their sleep chambers, Thexlan reviewed the tactical data from their latest attack. The human captain had run away in an escape pod, but the pod's power systems were failing. It would drift until its occupants died of exposure, leaving no witnesses to their raid on the Iron Phoenix. The biomechanical sleep chambers opened like giant flowers, their organic walls soft and warm to the touch. Krellian warriors climbed inside and allowed the living ships to connect tubes and sensors to their bodies. During regenerative sleep, the boundary between alien and vessel became almost meaningless as their biological systems merged completely. Within an hour, the entire Krellian fleet was silent and motionless, drifting through space like sleeping giants. Their bioships continued basic functions on automatic systems, but the crews were deep in hibernation that would last for several days. Miles away, the burning wreckage of the Iron Phoenix continued to pulse with invisible quantum energy. The experimental cores that Captain Walker had destabilized were creating ripples in subspace that spread outward at incredible speeds. The quantum cascade was growing stronger with each passing hour, fed by the intense radiation from the burning ship. The Krellians had no instruments capable of detecting quantum resonance patterns. Their biotechnology was advanced in many ways, but it was based on living systems that had evolved naturally. The artificial quantum fields created by human science were completely outside their experience. Deep in subspace, the cascade wave front raced toward the Krellian home system at many times the speed of light. The resonance frequency that James Walker had programmed into the destabilization sequence was about to encounter the vast biomechanical infrastructure of Krell Prime. On the sleeping flagship, Commander Thexlan dreamed of past victories and future conquests. In his mind, he saw endless fleets of human ships burning under Krellian weapons. The pathetic creatures would eventually learn to stay out of Krellian territory, or they would be wiped out completely. The other members of his crew shared similar dreams through their neural links. The Krellian species had conquered dozens of worlds using their superior biotechnology and ruthless military tactics. Humans were just another weak species that would eventually submit or be destroyed. But as the aliens slept, the quantum cascade was approaching their homeworld. Krell Prime was a planet covered with vast biomechanical cities that grew like coral reefs from the surface. Millions of Krellians lived in organic towers that reached into the clouds, connected by living bridges that pulsed with flowing nutrients. The planet's entire infrastructure was based on the same biotechnology as their starships. Everything was grown rather than built, using genetic templates that had been perfected over thousands of years. The Krellians believed this made them superior to species that relied on crude metal and circuits. The quantum wave hit Krell Prime's orbital defenses first. The living satellites that protected the planet began experiencing strange malfunctions as the resonance frequency interfered with their biological systems. Warning signals flashed through the planetary communication network, but there were no Krellian scientists awake who could understand what was happening. On the planet's surface, the biomechanical cities began to shudder as the quantum energy disrupted their organic matrices. The living buildings that had stood for centuries started showing signs of distress, their walls changing color and their support structures weakening. The cascade effect spread through every piece of Krellian technology in the system. Their bioships in orbit around other planets began experiencing system failures as their living components turned against them. The quantum resonance was triggering an autoimmune response that made the organic technology attack itself. Back in space near the burning Iron Phoenix, the sleeping Krellian fleet remained unaware of the disaster spreading through their civilization. Their bioships were just beginning to feel the first effects of the quantum interference, but the symptoms were subtle at first. Commander Thexlan's dreams began to turn dark as his neural link picked up distress signals from his ship's living systems. Something was wrong, but his hibernating mind could not process the warnings clearly. The fatal rest had begun, and the Krellians had no idea that their greatest strength was about to become their greatest weakness. James Walker stood at the airlock of the rescue freighter Mercer's Call, staring out at the debris field that had once been the passenger liner New Hope. Twisted pieces of metal floated silently in space, along with personal belongings that told the story of 300 innocent lives cut short. His hands pressed against the cold glass as he searched desperately for any sign of survivors. "I'm sorry, Captain," said the freighter's commander, an older woman named Captain Lisa Stone. "We've been scanning for 2 hours. There are no life signs anywhere in the debris field." James felt something break inside his chest. Helen and Robert had been on that ship, traveling to meet him at the colony world of Haven's Rest. His wife had been so excited about their new assignment, and their 10-year-old son had been looking forward to seeing the alien wildlife on the frontier world. "The burn patterns are consistent with Krellian plasma weapons," reported the freighter's scanner operator. "Multiple hits to the engines and life support systems. They made sure there would be no survivors." James closed his eyes and tried to control his breathing. The Krellians had killed his family not because they were soldiers or threats, but simply because they had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The aliens eliminated witnesses as casually as humans might swat flies. "Captain Walker," called out the communications officer. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from across Krellian space. Something big is happening in their territory." James turned away from the viewport, wiping his eyes. "What kind of transmissions?" "Distress calls, sir. Lots of them. Their bioships are malfunctioning all across their empire. Some kind of cascade failure in their organic technology." Meanwhile, in the Krellian home system, Commander Thexlan was jerked awake by alarms screaming through his flagship's neural network. His bioship was in agony, its living walls writhing and changing color as some kind of autoimmune response tore through its biological systems. "Report." Thexlan commanded as he stumbled from his sleep chamber, still groggy from hibernation. "Commander, our biotechnology is failing across the entire fleet," his second-in-command reported. "The ship's organic components are attacking themselves. It's like they think they're infected with some kind of disease." Thexlan connected to his ship's neural network and immediately felt its pain. The living vessel was experiencing something like a massive allergic reaction, its immune systems turned against its own cells. Similar distress signals were coming from every ship in his fleet. "What about Krell Prime?" he asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "The homeworld is in chaos, sir. The biocities are collapsing. Millions of our people are trapped in failing organic structures. The planetary defense grid has shut down completely." On Krell Prime, the quantum cascade had triggered a catastrophic failure in the planet's biomechanical infrastructure. The massive living cities that had grown over thousands of years were dying as their own immune systems turned against them. Organic bridges dissolved, living towers collapsed, and the flowing nutrient networks that fed the civilization shut down completely. Krellian scientists worked frantically to understand what was happening, but their biotechnology was useless for analyzing quantum effects. Their entire scientific tradition was based on growing and breeding organisms, not building artificial devices that could measure subspace phenomena. "The resonance frequency is somehow coded into our genetic templates," reported Chief Bioengineer Vextar from the dying capital city. "Every piece of our technology is responding to the same signal. It's triggering a species-wide autoimmune response." Back on his flagship, Commander Thexlan watched his mighty fleet falling apart around him. The bioships that had made the Krellians masters of space were now their greatest weakness. The living vessels were literally eating themselves from the inside out, their organic hulls dissolving as their immune systems went haywire. "Sir, we're detecting the source of the quantum cascade," his scanner operator reported. It's coming from the wreckage of that human cargo ship we destroyed. The Iron Phoenix. Thexlan felt a chill run through his scaled body. That's impossible. Human technology is primitive. They don't have quantum weapons. The resonance pattern suggests experimental quantum cores that were deliberately destabilized. The human captain must have triggered them before abandoning ship. The Krellian commander stared at the tactical display showing the burning wreckage of the human vessel. One primitive cargo ship had somehow brought down the entire Krellian civilization. The quantum cascade was still spreading, reaching Krellian colonies and outposts across dozens of star systems. James Walker stood in the communications center of the rescue freighter, listening to the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Krellian bioships were failing everywhere, their crews dying as their living vessels turned against them. The quantum resonance from his destabilized cargo ship had somehow found a fatal flaw in alien biotechnology. Captain, we're receiving surrender requests from Krellian commanders across 3 sectors, the communications officer reported. Their fleets are dead in space. They're begging for rescue. James thought about Helen's smile and Robert's laugh, both silenced forever by Krellian cruelty. The aliens had killed his family because they thought humans were weak and helpless. They had never bothered to consider that human technology might be dangerous in ways they couldn't understand. Sir, what should we tell them? Asked Captain Stone. James looked out at the debris field one more time, seeing pieces of his son's toys floating among the wreckage. The Krellians had made a fatal error in judgment. They had assumed that because humans showed mercy, it meant they were incapable of war. They had mistaken compassion for weakness and paid the ultimate price. Tell them that Captain James Walker sends his regards, he said quietly, and that they should have thought twice before murdering innocent families. The quantum cascade continued to spread through Krellian space, carrying with it the price of their deadly underestimation. The news of the New Hope massacre spread through human space like wildfire. Within hours of the first reports, emergency sessions were called in the Earth Parliament, the Colonial Council, and every major human settlement from Mars to the Outer Rim. The images of debris floating where 300 innocent people had died struck something deep in the human spirit. Admiral Patricia Mills stood before the assembled military commanders in the war room on Lunar Base. The holographic display showed the devastation across Krellian space, where their biotechnology was still failing from the quantum cascade. But her focus was on something else entirely, the cold fury she saw in every human face around the table. The Krellians made a critical error, Admiral Mills said, her voice steady and controlled. They killed our civilians thinking it would make us afraid. Instead, they've shown us exactly what we're fighting against. Captain James Walker sat at the conference table, still wearing the rescue suit he had been given aboard the freighter. His eyes were red from grief, but his voice was clear when he spoke. The quantum cores weren't designed as weapons. They were meant for faster-than-light travel. But when I destabilized them, they created a resonance frequency that interferes with Krellian biotechnology. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead scientist from the Quantum Research Division, leaned forward. Captain Walker's accidental discovery has given us the key to defeating them. Their greatest strength, their living biomechanical systems, becomes their greatest weakness when exposed to the right quantum frequency. How quickly can we weaponize this technology? Asked Admiral Mills. We're already working on it, Dr. Chen replied. The quantum resonance can be focused and amplified. We can build weapons that will turn their own bioships against them without affecting our metal and circuit-based technology. Across human space, the response was swift and coordinated. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels and colony ships immediately switched to military production. The quantum resonance weapons were simple enough in principle, they just needed to broadcast the same frequency that had accidentally brought down the Krellian Empire. On Earth, volunteers lined up at recruitment centers faster than the military could process them. The massacre of the New Hope had touched something primal in human nature. These weren't soldiers seeking glory or politicians seeking power. These were ordinary people, farmers, teachers, factory workers, who had decided that some lines could never be crossed. Lieutenant Commander Tom Harrison reported to the lunar shipyards where the first quantum-equipped vessels were being completed. The new weapons looked deceptively simple, just modified communications arrays that could broadcast deadly frequencies instead of messages. But early tests showed they could shut down Krellian bioships from thousands of miles away. The beauty of it is the simplicity, explained Chief Engineer Mark Roberts as he showed Tom the new systems. We don't need to blow up their ships. We just need to convince their ships to blow themselves up. Commander Susan Blake was assigned to lead the flanking squadrons that would hit Krellian outposts while the main fleet drove toward their core systems. Her ships were smaller and faster, designed to spread the quantum resonance to as many Krellian installations as possible. Remember, Admiral Mills addressed the assembled fleet commanders, we're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The Krellians have been raiding and murdering innocent people for months. Today, that ends. James Walker found himself promoted to captain and given command of the flagship Vengeance, named in honor of the New Hope and its lost passengers. The ship was equipped with the most powerful quantum resonance array ever built, capable of broadcasting the deadly frequency across entire star systems. As the human fleet prepared for departure, reports continued to pour in from Krellian space. Their civilization was collapsing as their biotechnology failed on a massive scale. Whole planets were going dark as their living cities died. Their military was scattered and desperate, their bioships barely functional. "Sir," reported the intelligence officer to Admiral Mills, "the Krellians are trying to surrender. They're sending peace offerings and begging for mercy." Admiral Mills looked at the casualty reports from dozens of human settlements that had been attacked by Krellian raiders. Thousands of innocent people had died, their ships destroyed and their families scattered. The New Hope was just the latest and most visible tragedy. "Tell them we'll discuss terms after we've secured their territory," she replied coldly. "Actions have consequences, and they're about to learn what those consequences look like." The human fleet that departed Lunar Base was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't the largest or most heavily armed force in history, but it carried something more dangerous than weapons. It carried human determination focused into a laser-sharp point. Captain Walker stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as they entered hyperspace, heading for the first Krellian stronghold. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They weren't celebrating or making speeches about glory. They were simply doing what needed to be done. "Captain," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving a message from the Krellian defense commander. He wants to negotiate." James thought about Helen reading bedtime stories to Robert, and how they would never do that again because of Krellian cruelty. He thought about 300 innocent people who had died simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Tell him he should have thought about negotiation before he started murdering families," James replied. "Today, the Krellians learned that humans don't just mourn our dead. We remember them." The human response had begun, and it would be measured not in anger, but in the cold calculation of people who had learned exactly what their enemies were capable of, and had decided to respond in kind. The final battle above Krell Prime was nothing like the Krellians had expected. Their massive bioships, once the terror of a dozen star systems, writhed in agony as the human quantum resonance weapons turned their living hulls against them. Commander Thexlan watched from his dying flagship as vessel after vessel in his defense fleet began consuming itself from within. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, his face calm as he watched the Krellian ships destroy themselves. The quantum weapons didn't need to fire explosive shells or energy beams. They simply broadcast the resonance frequency that convinced the alien biotechnology it was infected with a deadly disease. "Sir, the Krellian flagship is signaling surrender," reported his communications officer. "Ignore it," James replied quietly. "They had their chance to surrender before they started killing innocent families." Below them, Krell Prime was a world in chaos. The great biocities that had stood for thousands of years were collapsing as their organic structures turned against themselves. Millions of Krellians were trapped in buildings that were literally eating themselves, their immune systems triggered by the same quantum frequency that was destroying their fleet. Admiral Patricia Mills watched the tactical display from her command ship as human forces completed their encirclement of the Krellian home system. Task Force Resonance had swept through alien space like a plague, turning their greatest strength into their most fatal weakness. Every Krellian installation they encountered simply shut down as its biotechnology failed. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different Krellian commanders," her communications officer reported. "They're offering tribute, territory, even their biotechnology secrets." Admiral Mills thought about the reports she had read, hundreds of human ships destroyed, thousands of innocent people murdered, entire colonies wiped out simply because the Krellians viewed other species as inferior. The aliens had shown no mercy when they held the advantage. "Tell them we'll accept their surrender after we finish what they started," she replied coldly. Commander Susan Blake led her flanking squadrons against the orbital defense platforms around Krell Prime. The massive biomechanical structures had once been capable of destroying entire fleets, but now they turned their weapons on themselves as the quantum resonance convinced them they were under attack by their own immune systems. "It's almost too easy," reported Lieutenant Commander Tom Harrison as his squadron watched a defense station tear itself apart. Their biotechnology is so integrated that once the cascade starts, it spreads through everything. On the surface of Krell Prime, Chief Bioengineer Vextar worked frantically in his collapsing laboratory to find a solution to the quantum interference. The living walls around him pulsed with sickly colors as the building's organic systems slowly died. "We need to isolate our biotechnology from the resonance frequency," he told his surviving assistants. "If we can modify our genetic templates, we might be able to stop the cascade." But it was already too late. The quantum resonance had spread through every piece of Krellian technology in their empire. Their bioships, their cities, their planetary defense systems, everything was connected through the same genetic templates that had made them powerful. Now those same connections were destroying them. Commander Thexlan was brought aboard the Vengeance as the last functional prisoner transport. His flagship had finally died completely, its biomechanical systems consuming themselves until nothing remained but dead organic matter. The proud Krellian commander looked broken as he was escorted to the bridge. James Walker turned to face the alien who had ordered the destruction of the New Hope. Thexlan was still tall and imposing, but his scales had lost their luster and his forearms hung limply at his sides. The neural implants that had connected him to his bioship were dark and lifeless. "You wanted to see me?" Thexlan asked in broken human language. "I wanted you to understand something," James replied, his voice steady and calm. "You killed my wife and son because you thought humans were weak. You destroyed the New Hope because you believed we would be too afraid to fight back." Thexlan looked around the bridge of the human ship, taking in the metal walls and electronic displays that were so different from Krellian biotechnology. "Your species, we underestimated you. We thought your compassion made you vulnerable." "That was your fatal mistake," James said. "You assumed that because we choose to show mercy, it means we're incapable of war. You never understood that mercy is a choice we make, not a weakness we suffer from." Through the viewport, they could see the dying remains of the Krellian fleet drifting in space like corpses. The bioships that had once been alive and responsive were now just dead organic matter, their living systems destroyed by their own immune responses. "Your biotechnology was impressive," James continued. "But you built your entire civilization on a single point of failure. When we found that frequency, everything you had built turned against you." Admiral Mills joined them on the bridge, carrying a datapad with casualty reports from across Krellian space. "It's over," she announced. "Their last stronghold has fallen. The Krellian military is completely destroyed." Thexlan looked at the human officers surrounding him. "What happens now? Will you kill us all as we killed your people?" James was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Helen and Robert and all the other innocent people who had died because of Krellian arrogance. "No," he said finally. "We're not you. We don't murder civilians for sport." "But," Admiral Mills added, "your military capability is ended forever. Your biotechnology is too dangerous to yourselves to ever rebuild. And the galaxy will remember what happens when someone crosses certain lines." Thexlan nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. The humans weren't just defeating the Krellians, they were teaching the entire galaxy a lesson about the price of underestimating human determination. "We thought you were weak," Thexlan whispered. "You thought wrong," James replied simply. "And now everyone will know it."